Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dynasty Gambit, part of the Going for Two Live network here on Going for Two Live YouTube page, also on Twitch and Facebook. You can see the videos on Twitter. However, we won't be able to see your Twitter comments. So if you do want to join in, ask us questions, yell at us for saying ridiculous things, I probably will at some point. Feel free to join us again on the Going for Two Live YouTube page and join the chat. And we'll be sure to interact tonight. My co-host Brian and I will be interacting. No Gator Jay this week. Out swimming with the other Gators maybe, but hopefully getting back in a couple weeks. But Brian, how are you doing?
Oh, Kyle, I'm doing good. Just enjoying the aftermath of the Super Bowl and getting into our all-season content here, and couldn't hardly be better. How about yourself?
Yeah, doing well. The Super Bowl's over, so I guess we don't have any football for a bit, but, for dynasty perspective, the offseason really isn't an off-season. I've heard the term non-point scoring season, so maybe I shouldn't have titled this episode off-season, but yeah, we'll speak to the general sense of no football games being played, but yeah, it's there's a lot to get to, a lot to talk about, and I guess, we love the Super Bowl so much we could reminisce on that.
Let's not forget about the XFL. I watched a little bit of that last week. It's football, so.
That's true. I know the USFL will be back. CFL will kick off. I can't remember exactly what day in June. I know I've seen the schedule, but mid to early June. So, football's not that far away in a sense. Like you said, the XFL is already on, so not even skipping a beat, right? There is no off season when it comes to football.
Exactly.
But yeah, I guess we could start by talking about this big game. The Chiefs beating the Eagles 38-35. What a victory. And, a close, tight contest. I've heard people describe it as one of the most exciting Super Bowls in really ever, but probably not the best. And I think you have a specific reason why. So we'll let you start things off here.
Well, my biggest thing, my biggest takeaway, first of all, I didn't really have a dog in the fight. My best friend that was going to donate me a kidney a couple of years ago was an Eagles fan. My wife's family lives in Kansas. They're all Chiefs fans. So either way, I didn't really have a true dog in the fight. I just kind of hate that there was a defensive penalty there with under 2 minutes to go in the game that, it was on third down. By the letter of the law, even the defensive back Bradbury comes out and says it was a penalty. So fair enough. It's just you wish, regardless whether it was the Eagles or the Chiefs, whoever committed the penalty, you just wish that it would played out on the field rather than a referee kind of being more involved than maybe he had to be. But like I said, by the letter of the law, it was a foul. So.
Yeah, it did kind of take the drama of it out at the end. Didn't really give the Eagles much time left to score as a result of that. I guess it anticlimactic, so to speak, because it was such an exciting game through up to that point.
Yeah, that's the big thing. And like I said, I mean, it wouldn't have mattered which team it was against. If the Chiefs had been in defense, I would have felt the same way. But realistically, the Eagles did shot themselves in the foot a couple of times, allowing the longest punt return and then the pick and then the fumble recovery for 6 against Hurts in, I think, the second quarter. So, I mean, they have nobody to blame but themselves. So certainly they can't say, well, gosh, if it wasn't for the officials, we would have won this game. Because honestly speaking, the Chiefs played a cleaner game. But
yeah, they didn't make the big mistakes.
They did.
But yeah, the Chiefs, they didn't make the big mistakes. And unfortunately, while the Eagles offense was almost flawless, obviously the Jalen Hurts fumble, that was really kind of an unforced fumble too. That was a massive mistake. I wouldn't call it the biggest mistake and the biggest reason they lost, but because I will say it felt like at times the Eagles offense was outperforming the Chiefs. Maybe the mistakes equals it out, because I mean, I guess the Eagles offense did technically account for more points than the Chiefs. Part of that, the Chiefs offense anyway, part of that is the like you said, the Nick Bolton scoop and score for 6. So that's 6 points that the defense accounts for. So when you think about it that way, the Chiefs offense really only accounts for 32 points. That's including the field goals, if you'd like those field goal drives made by the offense. But I would say the offenses were amazing. I thought Jalen Hurts, in spite of the fumble, I thought had a fantastic game. I also felt he didn't let the fumble ruin his confidence. And that's a big part of playing quarterback. He kept slinging the ball. He kept being willing to run with it too. And it didn't seem to affect his play at all. He played just as well after that as he did before that.
Yeah, I mean, he came back at the very next drive and scored a touchdown from memory after the fumble. So, I mean, he got all of his receivers between Goddard and Brown and Devontae Smith. All of them were well involved in the game. A little bit disappointed in the running game that they didn't rely a little bit more on Miles Sanders. They basically just kind of left him for dead in the game. I don't know. I mean, I know that during the season, the Chiefs were better against the run in the past, but it seems like in a game such as this, you might have run a few more times like the Chiefs did with Pacheco. So I don't know. That would be another one of my takeaways from it.
To your point, like the Eagles having a halftime lead would be extra reason to run more in the second half, but they were also throwing very effectively. So you can understand that, Jalen Hurts again was throwing pretty well. So could see why they were moving the ball that way and continue to be aggressive.
Yeah, you definitely could. I mean, they were moving the ball well. And the Chiefs all year long I think they were somewhere in the bottom 10 against the pass. So I know in our pregame, I was definitely heralding the extra receivers outside of Brown, and they both had good games in Goddard and Smith. So and kind of anticipated kind of what I thought it would be. I think we all thought it'd be a high scoring game. I don't know that we all thought it would be quite that high, but possibly. So it was a really good game.
83 points total. Oh no, 73 points total. Sorry. Math. Took a gambit there and I lost. But you won't lose if you listen to the Dynasty Gambit, apparently. So, yeah, I thought both offenses operated really well. You could argue, again, the Eagles might have been more efficient. Well, actually, that's not true. The Eagles kind of just they ran the ball so well, they ended up using that to control a lot of the clock. But the Chiefs are really efficient with the limited time they had scoring points. So maybe you say the Chiefs were technically the better offense. I think neither defense played really well. Like both offensive lines kind of owned the day. And yeah, you could talk about slippery field, but these are also two of maybe the top 5 offensive lines in the league. So that in itself shouldn't have been so surprising. Just complete domination. And maybe that's a bit shocking considering how good the defenses were, but the offensive lines had it. I didn't think either defense really played that well. You'd argue the Chiefs defense played better because they got 6 points on the defense with the fumble recovery for touchdown. So technically you'd give them the edge. And like you said, the big punt return, longest punt return in Super Bowl history. While I felt like for the most part of the game, special teams was pretty even. The one key time you needed one, the Chiefs were able to get that. And it seems like, it seems like Jamie's here to ask a question. I'm here to bring the questions, but there's no questions. Just kidding you, Jamie. Well, not really. So if you do have any questions, feel free to ask. But yeah, I guess to me, I don't know what you feel about this, Brian. I think coaching actually made the biggest difference. And it was the 2 touchdowns Patrick Mahomes threw in the fourth quarter. Both were the same red zone defense setup for the Eagles, and both times the Chiefs ran the same play to just exploit it perfectly. Now, apparently this is a play Eric Bieniemy found that the Jaguars did. Funny enough that Doug Peterson is the one that has the key secret to beating the Eagles. That's kind of funny. But Jamal Agnew ran a very similar play where he's an outside receiver, fakes the motion in, and then goes back out, and the Eagles bite on it so hard that they leave him wide open. And Kadarius Toney ran it, Sky Moore ran it, Jamal Agnew. You get these fast guys to do it, and I guess that's the threat of the end around, right? If you don't bite hard on that end around, he's already gone before you can catch him. So it's all defenses kind of have a flaw, but it seemed like the Chiefs did a really good job exploiting what the Eagles' flaw was. And for the Eagles' perspective, this was a play. Again, this game against the Jaguars is late September, early October. Months ago, they dealt with this, or they faced this play, and they didn't have an answer to it. They didn't find a way to give themselves an answer to, okay, this could be exploited. We need to disguise something, change something. So that's maybe the biggest failure of the Eagles is coaching. They coached it basically the same way they had the entire season. Didn't really throw any, make the teams guess what your defensive formations is. You want to, like, for a guy like Patrick Mahomes, you want to fool him in disguise as much as possible. So it just seemed like the Chiefs were better prepared coaching. Not to say that the Eagles were unprepared, but that's just maybe I would almost argue the biggest edge in this game did come from coaching.
That makes perfect sense. And the other thing that happened, you can tell. I mean, honestly speaking, when we talk about both the offenses being so great, and they were, but the Chiefs somewhat struggled in that first half. So obviously there were some very key halftime adjustments made as well. So the Eagles were, they continued their game plan pretty much the entire game. The difference in second half from first half for the Eagles was just simply they didn't possess the ball nearly as much as they had in the first half. But the halftime adjustments, obviously, as well as throughout the entire season, not changing the game plans could arguably what caused the Eagles for sure. He's a young coach. I'm sure, hopefully for the Eagles' sake, he'll learn from it.
Well, the defensive coordinator's gone, so you hope the next guy can learn from that. Good luck, Cardinals, because you did hire him. You didn't hire the offensive coordinator that exploited the defense. You instead hired the defense coordinator whose defense got exploited. But yeah, that actually seems on brand for the Cardinals, to be honest. So life moves on as normal. Sorry to rip on the Cardinals. But I guess before I keep riffing and ripping on things, do want to shout out our sponsor, Underdog. And, we run a promotion here at Going for Two. If you use the promo code GF2, look at the hat, our, capital G, capital F, the digit 2, use that promo code on Underdog when you make your initial deposit, and they will double whatever that initial deposit is, up to $100. So if you do max out and put that $100 deposit in, they'll give you an extra 100 and you'll have 200 in your account to go, whether it's bet on games. I mean, yeah, we're talking about football season being done, or at least the NFL season being done. But you brought up before the show, the XFL has started. I believe it began last weekend. And I think the USFL, and of course, CFL in June, basketball, hockey, all sorts of sports going on right now that you can bet on. And I believe, well, not believe, I know this, Underdog has best ball drafts as well, because it's never too early to draft for the next NFL season, is it, Brian?
Oh, no. I mean, it's like we were talking about. It's a season-long thing, so the season never really ends. Even just the NFL season, we'll talk about here in a little bit. Their season really doesn't end either. If they end the 2022 season on one day or 1 minute, and the very next minute the 2023 calendar rolls. So we don't ever quit.
No, for sure. Do have a question here from Jamie, who's we're never going to quit. Supporting and answering the people who do come out and support us here. Do you think the Chiefs are drafting a wide receiver this year?
Depends on other needs, and depends on what they want to do. I mean, they've got the players there on the team if they are able, maintain Tony, and Juju's the free agent, so I mean they could need a potential replacement for him. But they do have Sky Moore coming back as well. So they got some young guys. So I wouldn't imagine it's the number one priority.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was just checking. We were potentially going to have a guest, but it looks like due to technical difficulties, we won't. So just you and I tonight, Brian. But yeah, I guess I should keep this question up. I don't know why I got that down. I'm panicking. I'm all over the place. Maybe like the Chiefs will do with this wide receiver room, because the truth is, like you said, with Juju leaving, I mean, you've got Tony and Sky Moore on rookie contracts. They just signed Marquez Valdes-Scantling, I believe, to a 3-year contract. So they've still got a couple years with him. So you've got kind of the basis of a wide receiver room. I think at some point in this draft, though, the Chiefs are going to spend at least one pick on a wide receiver. Now, that could be what they did with Isaiah Pacheco last year, and it's a 7th-round pick. But who knows? That guy could develop into somebody that is fantasy significant. So I'd be shocked if they don't take at least one pick at wide receiver. I'd imagine just because of how many picks most teams have, it'd be shocking if any team goes any year in the draft without at least one wide receiver. Whether it's, again, maybe that's a 7th-round pick that we're not really too interested for fantasy, but I think that I guess with the Chiefs, could one of the maybe elite 1st-round receivers fall to them at the 31st pick? Because thanks Dolphins for tampering with the NFL draft order. But that could be a potential. I think to say the entire draft, I would almost say 100% certain. I'll go 99% certain. I can't see the future that they'll take at least one receiver, but is that the 1st-round player? I think that's an interesting conversation. And I mean, assuming they take one at 31, there's probably at least 2 or 3 other receivers that went ahead of them. I guess it might come to landing spots, but I wouldn't be surprised if, let's say we'll take Jamie's example. Quentin Johnson, I was going to say Braylon Addison. He's already in the CFL, though. Hope he comes back healthy this year. Jalen Addison, right, I believe. And then Jackson Smith and Jigba. If those three players go, but Jalen Hyatt goes to the Chiefs, I don't know that we're going to raise Hyatt above them, any of them. I guess if there's someone whose landing spot's really bad, maybe we do. But I don't know. What are you thinking about that, Brian? This hypothetical situation.
The other player I forgot to mention that's a potential free agent also is Hardman. So, I mean, I see them. I don't think they'll go the entire draft without drafting at least one, maybe two wide receivers. Not knowing the roster completely, I don't know if that's their first round pick or not. But I mean, they'll definitely draft a wide receiver. But will it be first pick? I don't know. I mean, it's potential. There are a lot of good wide receivers out there this year. So,
yeah, absolutely. It's not a DJ Chark, Juju Smith-Schuster, as you mentioned, Jacoby Myers, and I mean, to be fair, Juju actually had a pretty decent Super Bowl, especially in the second half. So maybe he springboards that Super Bowl performance to a long-term contract with the Chiefs, and maybe they invest enough there that they actually don't want to spend first-round pick. They want to spend first-round picks to address the defense, because that's the one side of the football that Patrick Mahomes can't make up the difference on. I've always said that with the Packers. I haven't minded that they never spent a first-round wide receiver on Aaron Rodgers, and the simple fact is they've been so good with their second-round wide receivers that Jordy Nelson, Devontae Adams, Randall Cobb, they haven't needed to spend first-round picks on receivers. Spend it on a Jair Alexander, or Kenny Clark, because you're not getting impact defenders anywhere else. And so I could also see the Chiefs waiting later in the draft. But wait no longer. We do actually have our guest here, Sean Robinson. I think it's your first time on the Going for Two Live Network. You've been part member of Going for Two. So welcome aboard.
How's it going?
We're doing good. Yeah, we were just talking about the Super Bowl right now. So at the tail end of this conversation, you can join in. Were there any reactions, thoughts you want to share about the Chiefs' 38-35 victory over the Eagles?
Not so much. I mean, it felt like one of those games where the last team that had the ball was going to win. Obviously, you had the penalty and the controversy around that, and Jalen Hurts not getting the ball at the very end. For me, one of the bigger takeaways was the involvement of Devontae Smith. It seemed like he was always open when you needed him, and that may have been due to the defense round and that sort of thing. But we had seen A.J. Brown have some huge season, and obviously Devontae Smith was a top 12 wide receiver. But for me, going forward, it was nice to see wide receivers involved and have possibly two top 50 receivers going forward.
Yeah, I've got Devontae Smith, I think, at wide receiver 12. So I technically say the Eagles have two wide receiver ones. But yeah, I think it's that tier there kind of extends into the top 15. So I guess actually one of the topics you want to talk about, Brian, was dynasty risers and fallers. And it's funny because I was going to consider this guy a riser, but I was kind of ranking him this way even before the Super Bowl. I was just so impressed with the entirety of the 2022 season for Devontae Smith, and how A.J. Brown coming in didn't take away his targets. In fact, it made the passing offense so much better that Smith actually got more opportunities. So, sometimes the wide receiver coming, does it hurt the other receiver that's already established? It gives them less attention, because last year I'm sure teams could just focus in on Smith. And as you were saying, Sean, it seemed like A.J. Brown was the coverage priority. Well, he didn't get eaten by Gators. Gator J is here. Work is Super Bowl. It's BS, like bowl super backwards. I don't know. I'm stretching here, but he says Gator says, "What's up, Sean? Hi, Kyle. Hi, Brian." And yeah, Sean, appreciate you joining in place of the absent Gator and doing us a favor. So Brian, just looking at some of your other risers here, actually a lot of your risers and fallers have to do with running back. So I guess a big portion of our discussion for the offseason will center on running back. So any of these players that you have mentioned either as risers or fallers in the show sheet that you want to talk about right now?
Yeah, I mean, like y'all were discussing, Devontae Smith, I mean, everybody, he was already on everybody's radar because 95 catches and close to 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns. But that being said, I mean, Brown still got the majority of the attention to me this year. So I've got him certainly in my top 10, top 12. I mean, you could argue, as we all know, it's pretty arbitrary between top 10, top 12. But basically, that just means he's a wide receiver one in most fantasy formats. So that's really good. Then Isaiah Pacheco, to me, is kind of one of the bigger risers. Second half of the season, he really rose up some boards, and off the top of my head, he had I think 65 yards and a touchdown for the Super Bowl. And the thing that was pretty impressive about him against the Bengals in the championship round, he had 5 catches for 50 some odd yards. And so if he can be more consistent with that moving forward, I'd see him definitely in a top 15 dynasty running back to me. So I would consider him a riser.
Actually, just talk about rushing yards from the Super Bowl. That was a fun takeaway. Is we talk about the quarterbacks, how impressive they were passing. Mahomes and Hurts Hurts and Mahomes, I should say, in that order, were second and third in the game in rushing. Pacheco had 76 yards rushing, Hurts had 70, and Mahomes had 44. So Jerick McKinnon was next at 34. And then Gainwell. Oh, and then we find Miles Sanders, which I think, actually, before we get to Sanders, I do have a question for both of you, because I've had trouble with, in my dynasty rankings right now, specifically a big tier of the 2017 running backs. So I'm talking specifically Aaron Jones and Dalvin Cook, because I think, especially now with, potential suspension, likely suspension for Kamara, it's kind of easy to fade him. Mixon, same thing, the lack of pass catching opportunities, as much as he's a lot of touchdowns in that offense, and there's high potential. I just feel like I'd rather have Pacheco than all 4 of those guys. Is that too much of a rise for you, Brian?
So repeat the 4 guys again: Kamara, Cook, and who else?
Aaron Jones. I guess I didn't say Aaron Jones, but yeah, specifically Aaron Jones and Dalvin Cook, because I feel like I'm easily Pacheco over Kamara, probably easily over Joe Mixon, but I think right now in my rankings, I do have him, I think, 1 spot ahead of Jones, or and then 2 spots ahead of Dalvin Cook. So I don't know if it's too extreme for those guys.
That's too big of a rise to me personally. I can't get away from Dalvin Cook over Pacheco, despite the age difference. The Chiefs, they haven't traditionally done great at running back. I like Pacheco. I definitely consider him a riser. Do I see him having the value of Cook? Maybe not yet.
All right, Sean, do you want to chime in at all? What do you think dynasty-wise for those players?
For me, I think in Dynasty, it all really depends on where you're going. He's probably – so he runs incredibly hard. That would be the one thing is he runs with – so he is going to have a place in that offense next couple of years. The difference – and so if you're going for a championship, say you have a top 2 or 3 roster and in your – Jones and Cook are going to be closer to somebody who can actually win you a championship than Pacheco, more long-term value. Cook and Jones may be 1 year away from being, depending on how the situations work in their particular areas, whether Rodgers comes back or whether it's the offense. And then with Cook, I mean, he's going to have to go through several restructures to sort of Vikings cap issues. But for me, if I'm depending on where somebody who's rebuilding, I'm always the one to just say get rid of all the running backs and sort of doing the productive struggle, or some people will call it house money. I will keep Cook or Jones because Cook or Jones are going to have that name value, and you can probably sell them. But if I'm going for a championship, I mean, Cook's still going to have games where he gets 100 yards. Jones really is going to all depend on that offense. That offense could be horrible. We don't know what Jordan Love looks like, and if Rodgers isn't going to come. For me, it depends on where I am. If it's just a flat pick a roster, pick a personally going with the older guys, just simply because of the fact that they can probably win you a week, going to hold more of that 10 to 12 to 14 PPR points for the next several years. And
I guess the credit to both of you, I I think that's easier if you're like in a startup. You can manage the rest of your roster up to that point and then take a shot at an older running back kind of later, and cost control it, not knowing that you're not investing in an asset you're likely going to be able to sell high on. I've built my roster to contend now. Like if it's a super flex league and you've started with Kyler Murray, that's probably not the team you want to go with aging running backs on. If you're an earlier, in the startup and you're able to get a Trevor Lawrence or anyone ranked higher than him, then you're kind of more inclined to kind of go for it. And you can control the fact that you've got this asset. Like it's Derrick Henry to a certain extent too. Like you take him in a startup, not really thinking I'm going to be able to trade him for anything of value. I'm just going to smash people with points right now and try to win a title with them. And so if you can construct your roster that way, like you said, if the team's already built that way, I think I wouldn't be wanting to buy those guys right now, but those are guys that are maybe circled as buys if I'm contending through the season. But I think this is maybe the worst time to buy aging running backs right now, especially if it's costing draft picks. I'd rather wait. And, when there's more certainty in the season, I'll spend next year's draft picks in season on guys like that. So the fall of Miles Sanders also coincides, I think, Brian, with the rise of Kenneth Gainwell. So you can talk about both players in tandem if you'd like, as the Eagles clearly played them in tandem all through the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, at this point in time, to me, Sanders is a free agent. I don't know what the game plan is there for the Eagles. Do they plan on trying to bring him back or not? But I did find it interesting that, during the season, Gainwell really only had about 50 some odd carries. But then during the 3 games in the playoffs, he had 33. And he really wasn't injured, to my knowledge, throughout the course of the season. So it's almost like they kind of showed their hand, whether it was going to win a Super Bowl or not. It was almost like they wanted to get Gainwell more involved to see what they had. And to me, the writing's on the wall, but we'll see. I mean, stranger things have happened, so Sanders could be back. But Gainwell's going to have some value there in Philadelphia, it seems to me, at this point in time.
Well, inadvertently, you've received another invitation to come on the show, Sean. So Gator approves. So, your excellent dynasty analysis has worked. Would you like to chime in on the Eagles' backfield?
The elephant in the room is that the Eagles have been, and granted, I don't put a whole lot of stake in mock drafts because most of that is true falls. However, there is one giant elephant in the room as far as the Eagles are tied to Bijan Robinson. Now, if Bijan Robinson comes, the game's over. I think Sanders probably leaves. This is going to be a very, very interesting off because there's a deep rookie class that is going to be cheaper. There's probably more running backs than there are spots. So you have David Montgomery, you have Saquon Barnes. Miles Sanders probably needs to get out of Philadelphia. It seems like the Philadelphia coaching staff has had so much confidence in Miles Sanders throughout the entire time that he's been there. But they also employ a sort of like running back by committee and quarterbacks. Boston Scott is much of the sort of like drain the clock on the game. Will seem like a change of pace back until the playoffs, and then Miles Sanders was your normal like first. I have Gainwell in a bunch of leagues because I do think that they don't spend any draft capital on running backs and they just go with Gainwell and Scott. They do seem to like Boston Scott, but I also think it's possible that everyone comes back and Sanders comes back on a deep discount because he's the one left.
Yeah, I guess so many running backs are available that it kind of almost suppresses each of their costs. So these guys might be looking for big paychecks and not getting them. I guess that can lead us to our topic of we've already kind of got into it, that like what is the offseason going to be? But I guess, if we do get Jay and Sean on at the same time, we'll have a koala, we'll have a gator, we have an elephant in the room apparently, and of course we're talking about the Eagles. So it's animals as leaders.
We have to change their name.
The Dynasty Animal. Camel.
Exactly.
I'm gonna not try the puns anymore. But yeah, so upcoming free agents, and I guess we can continue to talk about running backs here. Quite an extensive list, but I think at the top of the list, and two very likely franchise tag candidates. I would say Miles Sanders and David Montgomery, two guys that Sean mentioned, are maybe kind of the sort of dark horse candidates to get tagged. They probably aren't, because the tag is probably more than what they're getting, like what they're asking for per year. But a couple guys that are maybe have higher value than what the tag is, and the teams tagging them actually ends up being value for them, are Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs. Jacobs coming off a career year. Barkley looked pretty resurgent as well. So, Sean, any thoughts on either of those two running backs? Do you think they get tagged, or are you seeing long-term extensions for either, or are they leaving?
So Jacobs, no, I don't think he gets tagged, running back. But I don't think that anyone outside of the Oakland organization knows exactly what they have a whole bunch of sort of aging assets in Devontae Adams and Darren Waller and Josh Jacobs, but is old for being a running back. I don't think he gets tagged there. I think that is entirely possible. There seems to be mutual interest on both sides. A lot of that's going to have to tie to Daniel Jones. So they're going to use the tag on Daniel Jones. Got to deal with Daniel Jones. They may want to tag Saquon. Saquon, the one thing that Saquon's lost a step. Now, he's still a great running back, but he is not the same guy, to me, watching the tape, that he was coming out of Penn State. So the Giants may decide that I think the tag is like $7 million is too much. Now, the reports are out there that he wants somewhere between 12 and 15 per year. Watching tape, he just seems like he's a step slower when he was injured, but he seems like he's lost a step, and I don't necessarily know that that's to tag him. First, they have the money on the cap. I just don't know if it's just to do so, especially we're going to keep going over this, especially given the running back class and a lot of these free agent decisions.
Yeah, they may view, okay, we can get Miles Sanders, who I guess it's funny. I'm pretty sure he followed up Barkley at Penn State, and now he'll follow up Barkley on the Giants at cheaper than probably what that franchise tag comes in at, depending on what Sanders asks for. But at least kind of more, maybe a little bit to closer to what they want to pay on a running back. So they may also just go the veteran free agent market there. But like you said, if they're really trying to build around Daniel Jones and it does cost them a lot, maybe they want to save the money as best they can and go with the rookie running back too. Do they draft Bijan Robinson to replace Saquon Barkley? That would I don't know that anyone's talking about that landing spot, but that would be kind of crazy.
I think that they draft Bijan. I think it's much more likely that they draft JSN out of Ohio State, wide receivers. Granted, none of them can stay healthy that they currently have, but he does need more weapons, regardless of whether or not he's on the franchise tag or a long-term deal.
Yeah, that's true. Receiver seems like it's a bigger need for them. A pretty glaring hole, one of the worst receiver rooms in the NFL. And apparently Dynasty Animals sounds like a good show. At least that's what a Gator said this. So maybe take that as a biased opinion. But Jeff, let's maybe we'll consider Dynasty Animals. Gambit with it. Brian, you and I were talking before the show. We kind of mentioned there's one massive domino, though. We talk about elephant in the room. I guess this guy runs probably faster than an elephant, to be fair. Well, I don't know. I guess I don't know what the actual foot speed of elephants are. But Lamar Jackson, whether the Ravens franchise tag him, seems like a long-term extension. They're pretty far apart. Is there even a possible trade potential? I feel like a lot of teams might just kind of freeze their moves until they know for sure. Can we get Lamar Jackson? Is he available? If available, he would be like the highest. Like he'd be the most high-priced free agent in this class, and it's not even close. Available for trade, as we've seen the last couple of years, that might be the way to get elite talent now. So yeah, what did Brian? I know we usually have a Lamar Jackson as the thumbnail, but in honor of the Chiefs, I went with the Kelsey Mahomes thumbnail on the episode. But I guess our favorite topic of ours, the gambit of where will Lamar Jackson go? What do you think?
It's an awful tough call. I think there's a couple things we need to recall. Is that the franchise tag has to be applied by March 7th. So it's not like you've got that much time to work on it. And last year, only 8 out of 32 teams actually used the tag itself. So it's 4 of those 8 players wound up playing on the tag. So it's a big question. That everybody's advising Lamar. A lot of people are advising Lamar that if they want to try to apply the tag, if they were Lamar, he would just sit out the year. So my best guess he's with Baltimore. They're going to sign him to a long term somehow miraculously.
Yeah, they up their offer. It seems like it's more the guaranteed money that seems to be the big holdup. That seems like they're quite far apart based on the reports that have come out. Maybe those may not even be true. But Sean, what are you thinking about Lamar Jackson right now?
There's a large part of me that hopes he stays with the Ravens team, essentially around him and around the style in which he plays. Obviously, they have Huntley behind, but not nearly to the level of Lamar Jackson. It really all depends. The Ravens seeing Huntley as a long-term option. So if, say, Atlanta for Lamar Jackson, do they go from Lamar to Anthony Richardson? Do they go to Will Levis? Do they trade up and get C.J. Stroud offense? Nor does Bryce Young. It would seem more likely that the person. But he is himself probably a project that is a year away. They probably can tell you, given his name, but I watched quite a bit, and he's absolutely talented to probably in the class. However, there are some times where he just does things and you just it's just sort of the don't understand. And when you get to NFL defenses, as we saw with even Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, and that's who, once they got experience, performed, that is not going to go well immediately. So Jackson probably gets traded. The most likely spot is probably Atlanta. To an offense with Kyle Pitts and Drake London and Algier and more. And I think all of those stocks from a dynasty perspective would all go through the roof. But I would say Atlanta, but that's just they have a high draft pick that could be converted into a quarterback. Sense.
Yeah, that's what Gator's saying. He thinks Atlanta in a trade, sign and trade, of course. I think division rival might almost make sense too. The Panthers. Seems like both teams were in last year on Deshaun Watson and were willing to pay up the draft picks needed to get them, and presumably also sign the money he's asking for. I think all these teams. I think part of these negotiations kind of being floated out and the information being floated out is, I think, to let teams know what Lamar is asking for. So maybe to encourage them to trade. Like, okay, these teams are probably already having these internal discussions before they've even discussed the trade. Are we willing to pay Lamar Jackson this? If so, okay, let's explore. So I think Atlanta, Carolina could get to be even a bidding war between them. I hadn't known this. Todd Monken, who has been hired as the Ravens' new OC. Gator's sharing this with us. I don't know if either of you knew this, but apparently Monken has not talked to Lamar. He does ask, how is that possible? But I will also stipulate we are February 23rd. We're pretty far from football. So I don't think it's necessary that every new offensive coordinator have all spoken to their quarterbacks so far. So it may not be that unusual. Would like some more context there. But does that also hint at they're not talking to Lamar about like systems for this year because they already know he's not going to be there this year because they've accepted that, okay, the trade interest will be so great and the price that someone's willing to pay is so good that we almost can't refuse we almost have to trade him away if we're getting that strong return, especially as you were kind of alluding to, Sean, if it's a top 10 pick, whether it's from Atlanta or Carolina, if that's involved in the trade, that's a really key piece that if it doesn't net you a quarterback, it's netting you an elite asset. And maybe, there's still quite a few free agent quarterbacks. Maybe they don't want to pay Lamar that, but they'll pay another quarterback less than Lamar, and maybe they forego the draft at quarterback, thinking that this is if they can get a veteran quarterback that they think they can win now with, maybe that's the route they go, or like you said, maybe Anthony Richardson falls that pick and they end up taking him to kind of almost be a one-on-one replacement.
So to sort of maybe answer Gators, the one thing to remember, and I'm sure most of us have figured it out, and I think part of the season works for prospective free agents, but Lamar's contract has expired. So he is more or less currently a free agent. Now, when they tag him, obviously at that point he's still not required to sign anything. I think it was Le'Veon Bell who had the same situation. Todd Monken, obviously coming from Georgia, and obviously being a Bulldogs fan, it was real nice seeing him finish out and beat. It's entirely possible that no one in the Ravens, other than the general manager, has split due to the fact that he is currently a prospective free agent, and they have not, as of yet, tagged him. He's sort of in limbo as far as, like, they don't know. They can't necessarily. They need defense around whatever quarterback is coming in if it's not Lamar.
Yeah, that's a great point too. Those internal discussions, we don't know exactly what they're talking about, the temperature gauges they're trying to take from all the other teams with, what is the price on Lamar, but also just knowing that, I guess he's technically, like, the contracts are still there because the league year hasn't flipped over, but for all intents and purposes, maybe the Ravens and other teams just don't really talk to players about structure and strategy and offensive philosophies until after free agency, and until they have a better understanding of all the players that'll be on their team. Maybe that's waiting to gather, and then once they have full intake of what they think their roster is going to be that year, then they can really get into the scheme planning, and then that's where you'll maybe see more communication. So it might be unusual, but it might not. I don't know how often these conversations between offensive coordinators and quarterbacks actually happen. This is interesting. As the GM in Atlanta, would you rather have Jackson or Richardson?
Jackson.
You see, and I think it's again, do you want the quarterback on the rookie contract or the quarterback on, you're going to have to pay right away? The truth is that division is so wide open that give me the quarterback. If we think, especially right now, Jackson's ability to win games is that much stronger than Richardson, who might need some, I think he was just a 1-year starter in college, so he might need some time to sit actually and learn the NFL game before he gets into the action. So if Atlanta goes after Jackson, I have to imagine they're the favorites to win the AFC South. And frankly, he might be the best quarterback in NFC South. But
I'm going to be honest with you on Richardson. He's a huge project to me. The talent's definitely there, but there were times in college he didn't even show that well to me. So I say Jackson because I'm not sure that Richardson isn't a potential bust in the NFL.
Yeah, for me, it's Jackson, and it's probably not incredibly close. One thing that Atlanta has is they have two preems, both in Pitts and London, both on rookie contracts. Now, that's not to be successful with Richardson, but I'm actually kind of Jackson goes to Atlanta for Arthur Smith to drive fantasy owners nuts, because that seems openly said he doesn't care about fantasy points. He's just trying to win games. I can see very much where Lamar has 100 rushing yards, Algier has 100 rushing yards, and Kyle Pitts gets 2 targets. Interesting. Now there are other downside effects of if Lamar or new. I think they actually believe in Ritter. Now, obviously, Ritter is not to the caliber of Lamar Jackson, but they believe in. But I mean, if Lamar Jackson goes to Atlanta with people who are calling Kyle Pitts tight end 1. Now, where you have him,
people have been calling them tight end 1 for years already anyway. Yeah, but that'll certainly draw them back up. You're right.
Value would go up, and there would be a lot of dynasty sides to that. Bateman would go. There are a lot of varying things, but for me, if I'm a GM, first of all, my prerogative is to win now, because nobody in the NFL was promised a job for more. So if you give me Lamar Jackson, I'll take him. I'm not worried necessarily about 5 years down the road. If I'm going to succeed, I won't be there. So it would be absolutely Lamar Jackson.
I guess
the question I've got also is if Jackson is traded to Atlanta, is Ritter part of the move back to Baltimore?
It's possible, I suppose. I think it's interesting because that does fit several other deals, like to Denver, Drew Lock went back, and obviously no one saw Geno Smith having the year that he had. Ritter is, to me, sort of a middling starting much better, but he's sort of one of those like slightly better than Gardner Minshew, slightly at start, sort of starting caliber quarterback. I don't think he's anything to set the world. Monken and the staff there as to what they're looking for. Because, I mean, if they go from Ritter, it's entirely likely to have to change the entire offense. They might have to anyway.
But I do think, though, again, if Atlanta's trading for Lamar Jackson, you have to think it's going to be like a 5-year contract. Like they're going to have him on the team through the rest of Ritter's rookie contract. So they'll have a high incentive to want to move that because some team will view that as valuable. A cheap quarterback that's cost controlled. And again, if the Ravens' whole problem right now is they don't want to pay Jackson, that actually probably does make a lot of sense that they'll at least want to get a quarterback, even if it's not someone they view as a locked-in starter, maybe someone that can compete with, I don't know, Tyler Huntley, who might also be a free agent.
Now, the one thing to that point is if you're playing GM, maybe you keep Ritter because Jackson has missed 5 or 6. You are going to need a solid backup. He may play an entirely different style, but his style is going to lead to injuries. Now, you can say that injuries can happen to anybody and they're fluking. I mean, you take the inherent risk because of the talent, but it's part of the reason why Baltimore won't guarantee the entire contract. Other than that, doesn't seem to be what they do. I don't know that Ritter doesn't stay just because they're expecting Lamar to miss 3-4 times. The entire reason that Huntley is there because he plays a similar style, because he understands the offense. He just doesn't perform as well.
That's a good point. What does that insurance look like? Because I guess if they do trade Ritter, they're probably going to have to sign some backup quarterback that's probably going to cost them more than Ritter would. So that maybe they do hang on to him.
And the other question I've got is let's get back to the Richardson discussion. If they wanted to go the route of drafting Richardson, is he really guaranteed to be that much better than Ritter? And then to me, it's not without a possibility that Ritter has a better career than Richardson.
Yep, I think that the upside ceiling of if Richardson hits, then he's probably the answer. But how many quarterbacks have we seen not hit their potential and their ceiling come into the NFL, right? So, I almost think, if you're Atlanta, like the team that probably wants to draft Anthony Richardson is someone that has a veteran quarterback established that they feel like they can win with now, and there's no pressure on Richardson to have to start year one. I've heard this landing spot floated out, and because they've got the extra first-round pick that doesn't belong to them, it belongs to the Rams. So Rams were not a very good team this year. So guess what? Their pick turned out to be really early. The Detroit Lions. If the Lions take, and Gator just basically typed it as I said it. But if the Lions take Richardson, they've got Goff. And I mean, Goff led them to a winning season last year. So is that someone who he's got the job for the year? And it's okay. Year 3 now of the Dan Campbell, Jared Goff sort of coaching quarterback relationship. They took a huge step last year, especially in the end of the season. Can they take that next step and make the playoffs? If so, then that'd be a next year problem after that to figure out, like, is Goff the long-term answer there or what to do with Richardson? But if it doesn't happen, then you just, at that point, it's easy to let Goff go and Richardson in year 2 takes over the team. So that would almost be the one landing spot where we're maybe not expecting him to play much. It might be like a Trey Lance type situation where you're drafting him even though you're not getting a lot of starts. But I think Detroit might be the ideal spot because, to your point, Brian, if Richardson is a project and needs more time, the fear is he goes to a team that starts him right away and he just falls on his face.
Well, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I that's his best. One of the better landing spots is just somewhere where it can be a project because he's not ready based on what I've seen.
I do think this whole talk of Lamar Jackson, whether it's being traded to Atlanta, being traded to Carolina, I think if that happens, he's probably the best quarterback in the NFC. So especially NFC teams, I think he's easily the best quarterback in that division. But especially if Aaron Rodgers gets traded, and the rumors have been out that the Packers do want to trade him, and some of the things they mentioned earlier reports were they only wanted to trade him to the other conference, to the AFC. So you're subtracting Rodgers from the NFC. Brady just retired. Like if Jackson does end up in that conference, I think he's easily the best quarterback in the conference, and that gives whoever trades for him a huge edge because not only in your division, but you think you might be able to legit make a Super Bowl with him.
I think that's a fair point. Running off the top quarterbacks in the NFL, they're all in the AFC. So, I think that's a very fair point.
It's him or personally, I would go with Jalen Hurts. But
Hurts, yeah,
it's close in terms of the. So Hurts and really close. Hurts obviously has had the advantage at least this year with the better start. Him. It would be interesting to see if Lamar without someone like Hollywood Brown, who did not do incredibly well, and Mark Andrews, who's obviously a safe running back, went down. From a dynasty perspective, it would be interesting to shoot Lamar. So Lamar right now is dropping. So I mean, you're gonna. I've seen him anywhere 8 to 110 range to the beginning of the second round. He probably goes back to the range. He probably re-jumps Fields and Lawrence. If I'm an owner, I probably see if I can pry Lamar Jackson away. That the value, 6 months from now is probably going to be entirely different than the value. Everyone's saying, well, maybe he won't play, maybe he'll sit out, whatever it might be. If he goes to Atlanta, he's going to skyrocket.
Second round Lamar Jackson in a startup, that's almost unthinkable.
Because
to me, if I'm the team's at 110, 111, there's no way I'm risking him coming back. Like even if the team that landed, I'm like, okay, if I'm 112, 201, I'll take Lamar 201 just to mess up the ADP. But man, that's a big risk trying to let him slide, because I'm sure there's some startups where he's a top 6 pick still, where people just believe in the talent and they think, you know what, if he goes to another team, maybe it's better than the Ravens. They have better weapons, certainly at wide receiver than what they have this year. You don't really want to be throwing to Marcus Robinson and Sammy Watkins, Deshaun Jackson in 2023. That is.
Yeah. So the startups that I've done, it's been startups that have rookies involved, and he's actually fallen behind both Stroud. Now, obviously, we have rookie fever this time of year. So realistically, he's in that between him, Fields, and Lawrence. Probably him and Fields. He's probably in range, depending on whether or not someone in the top 6 takes a wide receiver instead.
Yeah, because I mean, like, as much as we've seen Deshaun Watson, have success before, I think after the bit of season he just showed a lot of rust. There's no way I'm taking Watson over Jackson in a startup. And I mean, frankly, if it's super flex, Jefferson and Chase are amazing, but there's no way I'm taking either of them over Lamar Jackson. So to me, like I like that range there. Trevor Lawrence, Fields, like that's probably a really good range with Lamar. Whatever you kind of, I guess Lamar and Fields sort of offer a certain flavor of quarterback. Trevor Lawrence might come down to scoring settings, right? Okay, 6-point passing touchdown leagues. I guess actually Lamar does throw a lot of touchdowns, so that he's someone like some rushing quarterbacks, like a Jalen Hurts, for instance, who relies so much on the rushing touchdown side of it. He's maybe slightly hurt by a 6-point passing touchdown scoring league. Lamar Jackson less so, because with him, he'll still throw a lot of touchdowns in the red zone. His touchdowns tend to be long distance ones, so he's maybe even that like. Yeah, I'm having a hard time finding the spots where he's not like QB 8 at the very latest, but I'm even thinking closer to QB 5, QB 6. So could be. So, I mean, this right now it sounds like Lamar Jackson's a buy-in dynasty. That's basically what we've come to the conclusion on. If that's, and he might not be priced like that in every league, but if he's priced at a back-end first-round startup value in leagues, that's the strike right now. While there's so much uncertainty, we don't know what spot he's going to. This actually might be the best time to buy Lamar Jackson, because as soon as he lands and gets that big contract, even if we don't love the landing spot, the idea of the stability will probably make his price increase, and you might see him again go back before Lawrence and Fields and startups. So This is
He's
probably
a buy for about the next 3 weeks, I would say.
Yeah. Gator mentioned something about the day of the franchise tag. The tag window opened Tuesday.
March the 7th. Yeah, you have to do the franchise tag.
But I think they were eligible. They could start this week, I think. So
it actually started the 21st. So it runs from the 21st through March 7th is when you can apply the franchise tag.
So Jamie's chiming in too, kind of thinking what I was thinking, and I haven't actually done any startups this year, but just being in group chats and see what people are saying. He hasn't seen him fall out of the first round. 112 is usually Dak and Fields. Fields felt him the other day. That one's weird because we're typically seeing Fields in a lot of startups. I don't know what you've seen, Sean. Is he falling like Lamar with, again, the uncertainty? Okay, is the Bears going to trade him, or is he kind of firmly in that top half of the first round?
So it's
middle.
To plug a little too, I'm actually writing a article on startups, and I've done about 6 so far. Isn't sustainable year over year, but I figured this year will be the year of the startup. Apparently, for pretty tight in that 1.8, 1.9, 1.10 range. Some people are taking Justin Jefferson. That I actually understand, because there's more uncertainty with any of those top quarterbacks. Just simply due to the fact we don't know if he's going to be a Chicago Bear. Dak is definitely falling. I think some of that is just prospect fatigue, like Dak being that 10 to 12 QB. I mean, I don't value Dak and then say CeeDee Lamb is wide receiver 3. I don't think those are things that people should. But for me, Trevor Lawrence is QB 5. So different ranking than most people, and I do think that sort of like 5 to 10 range. Everyone has a little different flavor of what they look for. I am a Jaguar fan, so there's a certain home cooking there, but I've also watched every single one of his games. I think he only one of that bunch who has the ability to take over the sort of consensus top 4. Allen and Burrow. I think he can take over Burrow. But the sort of like 6 to 12 range, 6 to 14 has just been jumbled all get out. Lawrence is rising, Lamar is falling, and CJ Stroud and Bryce Young have sort of fallen on that very owners who may just have rookie fever take both of them. They on the turn the 1-2 CJ Stroud, which is why Lamar fell to 2-2. I think it happened that the person who took it up with Lamar in that particular startup. But Dak has been falling to the turn, fall any lower than like 1.9. But settings are.
Well, and I think specifically with Dak, when you look at the top 12 quarterbacks, and you can even extend that, like if you have Trey Lance, like I've got Daniel Jones at QB 14, and that's probably where the rookies slot in. You look at that top 15, he's the oldest. Like it's all guys that are younger than him. So from a dynasty perspective, you see him as the old guy in this group. So that probably also makes him fall to the end of the first round pretty consistently. Gladys is joining us too. So be sure to check out next Thursday. Gladys will have the episode 2 of her new show, No Particular Order, with I believe her sister will be her full-time co-host. So glad to have Terry on the Going for 2 Live Network. We were able to bring Sean on this week. It's just it's great. Everyone join the Going for 2 Live Network. Come subscribe on YouTube as well for updates, because we have a lot of shows throughout the week. And so definitely check out in no particular order next Thursday. Jamie's mentioning hi to Gladys. He also said hi to us earlier. So yes, Gators kind of he just named a bunch of quarterbacks. I assume these are his rankings, so I'll just read them out. Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Burrow, Herbert, Lawrence, Watson, then Jackson, Fields. And now, and this is where I think, again, the scoring settings come into it, because Gator, if it was, let's say, a point per carry league, and you're going to boost up the quarterbacks with rushing attempts, I'm guessing you're raising both Fields and Jackson at least probably ahead of Watson, Lawrence, wherever that ends up. So it does make sense that you also do rank them next to each other. But yeah, I'm curious. Like, so you said, Sean, you have Lawrence at QB 5. So do you have him ahead of Justin Herbert?
Mm-hmm. I do.
Okay.
One in
Interesting.
Gators ranking that I think is so. This is one thing is like Watson sat out a large part of 2 years. Essentially, was gone. He was a top 5 dynasty quarterback before he left. I mean, unless what's happened broken him in some way. I mean, you have to assume that he didn't have incredible weapons when he was with the Texans. I mean, he had DeAndre Hopkins until, and then obviously he had. I mean, we don't know, like some people, whatever it is, pushes them over the edge. We don't know what Deshaun Watson's been through, and that itself is a very touchy issue. But he is sort of that quarterback in the top 12 that probably for ascension, just simply due to the fact of what he was as opposed to have on him. But I think that there is a sort of set top 12. At people, it's realistically sort of where the jumble's in. Now, with Lawrence and Herbert specifically, I just believe Lawrence is more. First of all, the weapons are starting to equal out. There's some age on the Chargers wide receivers. Ridley, one would assume he has ETN. You're going to see a very defense, and Jacksonville's defense is still horrendous. So, Lawrence is going to have 30 to 27. He is going to provide fantasy value for that, and some of the boneheaded mistakes year and a half or so seem to be abating, where he was trying to talent over situation. He was trying to push through it like he had done at Clemson, like he had done in high school. But I do have Lawrence number 5, and I do believe he can take over Burrow. I have to take over Hurts or Allen, and he's not Patrick Mahomes. There's only one Patrick Mahomes. To 10, depending on how your league values the 6 to 10, I think would be the most important. Some steals there, especially this time of year.
I think what Gator was saying, yeah, that's correct, Kyle, was my observation of, what your scoring settings might dictate what that order is from 6 to 10 and just how that exact mix comes to be. Jamie, again, the Cleveland connoisseur. So he says, nice to you to have Watson that high, but he's been going early to mid-second. So he's another guy that you might, like a Dak Prescott, see fall to the late first or out of the first entirely. So, again, maybe a good buy on him now. Because I think the idea is if he played so poorly last year because of rust, even if it was just 6 games, that's suddenly 6 games where the rust, like now the rust wouldn't apply because he just finished playing. Again, it's a smaller sample size, but the idea that he hasn't played for 2 years no longer exists now. So just getting on the field last year and playing those limited games enough to springboard that potential top 5 season
There's
this
also
year.
A growing familiarity with the people around him. So that is an important thing as far as him playing football. Now, there may just be the fact that played football probably since he was 5 years old, to spend 2 years essentially not playing football other than scrimmages. And I don't think he was with the Texans at all, so I'm not entirely sure if he did anything football.
I think he played DB a bit in practice. He was a safety.
Interesting. But see some improvement on his level of play. I think they also need to figure out their offense. It just seemed disjointed, whereas with Brissett, they seem. I think it's hard to switch quarterbacks midstream. Now, Brissett is not a running quarterback, basically different than what Watson does. But it did seem like their offense was a tad bit disjointed. I think to be able to, an OC having an entire offseason of Watson to try does best, whereas last year they were trying to make the playoffs and understanding that he was going to be out for the first. You'll see better play, one would hope, but this will be the very first 5 weeks of the season are going to be very telling as far as what his
Okay, it's Gator. Interesting here. Lawrence is my pick to be the QB1 this year. The chemistry built last year with him and Peterson, and of course, the wide receivers is only going to get better. Then add Ridley. To your earlier point, I think I might actually take the Jaguars' weapons right now over the Chargers' weapons. So, like to your credit of the Lawrence over Herbert, I can totally get that. And yeah, maybe he has he's supposed to be the generational quarterback, right? Maybe he has that tool set to he can lead the league in passing touchdowns next year. Like he's kind of has that potential. So yeah, I guess a lot of these quarterbacks are good buys to go get. And I think anytime you can get a top 12 quarterback in Superflex without having to give up one, I think that's a key kind of time to go do that. Now, and Vandegrad disappeared. I think we'll get Brian right back. But the last player, or one of the last players I want to talk about was, again, if Lamar Jackson is the biggest domino to fall this year in terms of like teams going after him, teams wanting to invest, Aaron Rodgers might be next, certainly on the quarterbacks that teams would have to trade for. So I know there's been a few kind of destinations floated out with Rodgers, and I think it's funny because it's the opposite of Jackson, right? We're assuming changing conferences. If Lamar Jackson gets traded, we assume that'll be to the NFC. It's why we've been mentioning Atlanta, Carolina. But with Aaron Rodgers, it does seem like he'll be going the other way from the NFC to the AFC. At least is what the Packers have reported is that's their intent and they're interested to. Now, the other thing could happen too is Carolina and Atlanta could both be so QB hungry that they're just willing to spend so much more than everyone else that whichever one of them doesn't get Lamar will be the one to get Aaron. So maybe he stays in the conference. That'll be a fun, interesting battle in the NFC South between Lamar and Rodgers if that were to be the case. But assuming that doesn't happen, and what the Packers said is true, they want to trade Aaron Rodgers to the AFC. It seems like there's two teams especially that have been really floated around, but I actually have a third team that I think is just as likely that doesn't seem like I don't know, doesn't seem like it's being talked about at all. So I don't know. We'll get your thoughts, Sean, like what you expect with Aaron Rodgers this offseason. If there's any teams you think he'll get traded to in particular.
I actually expect him to stay.
Okay.
So that is hard to figure out, and by his own admission, on the last time he was on McAfee, his team doesn't talk to the media. So if you're hearing things that's not from his team, was specifically the words that he said. So he's the hard guy to figure out. But for me, I think for Rodgers, he is sort of the symbol of like Favre was before him. Favre obviously moved around several times after leaving out. I don't think Jordan Love is going to provide the emphasis of pushing Rodgers did for Favre. But if you trade him to one team, sense to me is the Raiders, because of exactly what you said. Because obviously he has a giant cap number, but you have Devontae Adams there with, but you have Josh Jacobs, Darren Waller in the same window as Aaron Rodgers, and obviously a lot of people are going to say the Jets. I would say the one, but much better defense than the Raiders do. But the way, so there's some sort of friendship between him and Zach Wilson, if Zach Wilson is still there. But I think for me, given the window of the team, it's probably the Raiders. And Devontae, and obviously he's gone tongue-in-cheek with the media as far as Devontae buying him a house. But for me, that would be the team. And from a fantasy perspective, best team for him, because it's going to have weapons that, first of all, know how to play. Second of all, it's going to be, he may not have an MVP season because he may just not, but he will definitely be sort of a usable, if you're going for a championship quarter that, you spend a little capital on, he helps you win a championship, and then or whatever he decides to do.
That's a good point. And like you said, your first inclination is to say that he stays. The Packers want to win a Super Bowl so bad, and that's kind of, as a Packers fan, as a Gator eloquently mentions. I'm not turning this to Packers pod, folks, but yeah, I don't know that Jordan Love can win a Super Bowl, especially immediately. Apparently, Aaron Rodgers is out of the darkness. He's not into the darkness. I guess he doesn't believe in a thing called love. Bad music reference there. Sorry, guys. But yes. Now, I guess he referenced the shot of the spitting image of Brett Favre. Does he follow him like exactly like Favre did to the Jets? And I guess the one, why would Rodgers want to go to the Jets? Seems like he kind of, as much as you mentioned, doesn't necessarily, his team doesn't always talk to the media. Does seem like he's not one to also shy away from the spotlight. And the New York media, you might be into that, like just being part of that big metropolitan place. I don't know. I don't think he would have, at the very least, it wouldn't be a reason not to go for him. I don't like he's not one to back away from that challenge. I'm scared of the media, right? Whether he wants to be there and embrace that or just it's something to work around. I don't think that would be the deterrent. So it does seem, Sean, as though the Raiders and Jets have been two of the teams that have been floated out. So good that you mentioned that. Brian, what do you think will happen with Aaron Rodgers? Before I reveal again, those were the two teams I mentioned, but the third team I think is just as likely. That I think, again, doesn't seem like anyone's talking about. Will you talk about it? We'll find out.
I'm gonna lean towards the Jets. He wants to be in a situation like anybody else where he can win the Super Bowl. They didn't seem very close to me in Green Bay last year, so I don't see him staying. If he goes to the Raiders, Josh Jacobs is coming back on the tag. They're going to go. They would go for one. They would go for the win. So. They've already got Devontae. They would have Aaron Rodgers. They would have Darren Waller. Jacobs was coming back on the tag if they want to go win. If they want to try to win it all. So Aaron Rodgers is the key to all this, but he's not staying in Green Bay.
So Gator's saying Rodgers to the Colts. It's be funny because that's what the Colts have been doing. Let's get the old quarterbacks year after year. Phillip Rivers. Oh, he retired. Carson Wentz. Oh, we almost wish he'd retire. Matt Ryan. Man, he should have retired. At least Rodgers is better than all of them probably combined. So, but it also feels like the Colts have done this just too many times, and they're in a position to get a young franchise quarterback. So I'm kind of thinking like the Texans could be one of those teams too, but they probably would just rather build around the young franchise guy. And I don't know that they're quite ready. Maybe the Colts are closer to contention. But my team that I think Rodgers will actually go to, and this is the one I've landed on as my number one most likely, and it's simply because no one else is talking about it. So if it happens, I can be like, I told you, I'm right. That same division, the Tennessee Titans, and they've been pushing for it, year after year. They obviously didn't make the playoffs last year, but it also seems like as good as Tannehill has gotten them, it seems like they need to take a step up at quarterback. And Vrabel, he wants to win now. Probably not too happy that, losing. And then you see the Jags in their first year after being just awful. They come in and they actually win the first playoff game, which the Titans have failed to do. So I could see them, in order to keep up with Trevor Lawrence, pushing the chips in and going after Aaron Rodgers. They're probably upset about losing A.J. Brown. So this year it's like, okay, instead of getting the rookie, instead of getting Treylon Burks, although that'd be fun because I wanted that in Green Bay last year. The Aaron Rodgers, Treylon Burks connection, might get it in Tennessee next year. But I could see them being the team that just really pushes all the chips in, thinking we've got the pieces now where if we have a quarterback like Rodgers, our receiving core isn't so impressive. But again, like having Treylon Burks there, he can get the most out of Burks. And that might be enough with the ground game of Derrick Henry to lean on. I know that I would just say that the Titans just cleared $40 million cap space. And when I saw that, I thought, they're going after something big, and for some reason I don't think they're going to pay Derek Carr $30 million, because I think at that point they're probably better off just sticking with Tannehill, because I don't think Derek Carr is very good. It's funny, that's probably the third big domino in free agency though. The team that strikes out on Lamar, strikes out on Aaron Rodgers, can't trade for them. I think some sucker franchise is going to way overspend on Derek Carr, and by overspending, they're also not going to have the pieces to properly surround him. So. But yeah, my theory is Rodgers to the Titans. I guess Brian's going with Jets, and Sean's saying he stays in Green Bay. As a Packers fan, I would love it. So we'll hope you're right. At least I do. But yeah, Brian, I know you had quite a few players listed. Is there any last player you wanted to mention before we head out of here?
No, I mean, just the biggest thing about free agency, like we talked about before we hopped on here, is the running back class is the one to look at this year. Last year was wide receivers. This year it's definitely the running backs, and be interesting to see where the dominoes fall. And we'll know a lot of that when the franchise tag has to be applied by the 7th. Then after that, you can only come to agreement with your guys by March the 15th, and then free agency starts at 4 p.m. So definitely keep an eye out on the running back situation and see where all those dominoes fall. It's going to completely impact fantasy football this year.
And just look ahead to our schedule. Like I said, next Thursday on March 2nd, Gladys will be taking over with the no particular order show. We'll be back on March 9th, 2 weeks from now, which means we'll have the franchise tag deadline will passed. So that'll probably be something we talk about on the next episode, is at least who's gotten tagged, and maybe we've had some long-term extensions for players and they avoid free agency. So maybe we'll have that type of news as well. But yeah, I think for now, Brian, I know I certainly am, not to speak for you, but I think we're both really grateful that Sean was able to show up and join us and make this a trio. It's always a bit of a gambit doing this with only 2 people. So really, really appreciate it, Sean.
No, he did a great job. I'm not sure if he's had previous podcasting experience. I think I was reading first time for going for 2, but he did awesome. So like you said, we'll have the franchise tag information, and then also the scouting the NFL Combine will have taken place too. So we got a lot to cover next time.
Yeah, that's a good point about the Combine. But yeah, I guess cool if the FF Koala could come and hang out with us. I'm just grabbing on to any reference I can here, but really appreciate it, Sean. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just want one last shout out to the sponsor, Underdog. And again, use the promo code GF2 to get that double deposit match. Use that money. You can be betting on sports. You can be joining best ball leagues. And then we got all sorts of great content at goingfor2.com that will show. You see, I don't get this statement because Gladys is saying Dynasty Virgin. We've been in a Dynasty league for 2 years together, Gladys. I think at this point, you're not virgin anymore. I know there was the struggle to make the playoffs last year. Trust me, I haven't made the playoffs in that league yet either. So, but yeah, no, I think she said she claims she knows nothing about Dynasty. I think she knows quite a bit, at least a little bit more. But then she lets on. Nice, humble way to stay humble, Gladys. We should always be trying to fill our brains. I still suck. Same here. So it doesn't care. There's nowhere to go but up. Then let's just keep improving together. And hopefully, listeners, anyone watching, listening, does improve from all this and gets them to think about Dynasty. Again, Sean, is there anything you want? I know you said you've been working on startup articles at goingfor2.com. Is there anything else you'd like to plug before we leave?
No. So I have just joined another website last year. I had some personal things I had to take a step away from. The first article for Going for 2 is going to be sort of a comprehensive one. It'll take me a little while to get put together. A Dynasty strategy article, both walking through my own particular strategies and each where it might be, and other pivots, learning from my mistakes, learning from my successes. That should be sometime in the next week. Realistically, editing it down and paying too much attention to every little thing. But very shortly that will be it.
Attention to detail. We love that here. And Brian, is there anything else you're working on? I know you do are part of some other shows as well. So if you want to plug that, now's your chance.
Yeah, like always, you can reach me at VandeGrad92 on Twitter. By the next time we're on, I'll be having some content, perhaps with for frequency's sake, my other website that I work with. I'm looking to possibly do some DFS baseball this spring. So I got a lot of things that are running through my mind anyway.
Yeah, on DFS, you got to swing those fences, right, and take those big shots.
You got to swing for those fences. Got to definitely have top end pitching to do any good. So,
but yeah, we'll not bore the non-baseball fans with any more references here. We'll glove out of here. Yeah, that didn't make sense at all. Clearly not a baseball fan, right? But do appreciate all the fans of the show for stopping by. We had Gator. Well, Gator's a co-host on the show, so appreciate our co-host who couldn't be here, but felt like he was still here with all the comments. So really appreciate that. Gator, Gladys, Jamie, the Cleveland connoisseur, as the B League says, has coined him. I love alliteration, so I'm going to keep saying that. But yeah, on behalf of Sean and for Brian, and again, Sean, really appreciate you coming on. Thank you. Anyway, I'm Kyle Senra, and this was the first of the off-season episodes of the Dynasty Gambit. We'll see you all in 2 weeks.